Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the September 13th, 2023 meeting of the City of Lake Forest Plan Commission. My name's John Dixon. I'm chairman of the Plan Commission. At this time, I'd like to ask my fellow commissioners to introduce themselves, starting with my far left and going clockwise.
Lisa Nearing, Ward 3.
Louis Pickus.
Jamie Moorhead.
Mark Pasquazi.
Barrett Davy.
And from the City of Lake Forest here this evening, we have Kathy Cernak and
Jen Bear.
Jen Bear. Welcome, Jen. Next item before the commission this evening is consideration of the minutes from the June 14th, 2023 meeting. Are there any comments, questions, clarifications to the minutes? Hearing none, do I have a motion to accept the June 14th, 2023 meeting minutes?
So moved.
All in
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The first and only item, matter before the commission here this evening is the opening of a public hearing and preliminary comments on the new plans for the redevelopment of the vacant property located on the southeast corner of Waukegan and Everett Roads. The proposal is for a multi-family residential building with detached garages, a coffee shop, a drive-through, a subdivision with cross easements, special use permits, and variances are being requested. At this point, I'd like to ask the commission members if there have been any ex parte communications or any conflicts of interest.
No.
No.
Nope.
No.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to swear in everyone who thinks they might want to speak either in support or opposition of this matter or any other matter on the agenda this evening or not on the agenda this evening. Would you please stand where you are and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly state that the testimony you shall give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? With that, I will ask the petitioner and their team to come forward for the presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Jack Frigo.
Welcome back,
Thank you.
Jack. Nice to see you.
No, I was thinking about the last time we were here, not here, but the last time we appeared before you for a plan that you approved. We were all connected by Zoom. And the pandemic was raging, and we were in different parts of the country. And so it's nice to really be here and see everybody in person. Kathy, I have a question. Do you go through any presentation, or would you like us just to make our comments? Because I have comments and an introduction for our team.
You have, the petitioner has 20 minutes for your initial presentation, and then we will have staff comments, and then the commission will ask questions, and you'll have the opportunity to answer those.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Chairman and Kathy. What I'd like to do is tell you how it is that we, the significant change between this plan and the plan that you had previously approved is that we have changed the medical office building, a 28,000-foot medical office building, to a 32-unit luxury apartment building. And I wanted to tell you why. Like, how did that happen? It's a fair question. As you may remember, Melikar Architects designed our medical office building. We were well positioned, in our view, between the three major hospital systems. The pandemic definitely hit us hard. Most real estate stopped dead in its tracks, or at least not most, but not all. The medical offices were not really occupied as much as they normally would be, except for the offices that service COVID testing and treatment. So we navigated our way through that. We engaged Cushman and Wakefield. We engaged their healthcare department to contact hospitals and medical office users to look for tenants because we needed to hit a pre-leasing level in order to start the building. And it just didn't deliver results. And overall, the general office market is in very bad shape. The medical office market is much better, but the growth still hasn't been there. So while we've been marketing the space, we were approached by a developer, a very experienced developer, who I'll describe in a bit, to see if we would consider selling the area that was the former Pasquesi Home and Garden, which is the southern piece, the larger piece of this property. And his idea was to develop a luxury apartment building, and he thought that the market was there for that. And as you may know, both, say, apartment buildings as well as industrial properties are the real healthy sectors of the real estate business. They're both softening a little bit right now because of inflation and interest rates, but for the past 10 years, they have really been on an upward trajectory. And so Carmen Iosu, the property owner, and I, and Nicole Mertens, Carmen and Tina's daughter, she's a partner in the real estate, met with Greg Van Schaak, who we'll introduce in a moment, and we discussed what the format might look like in order to put a deal together. We reached agreement with him. The property, the south property, the Pasquesi Home and Garden site, is under contract. So Greg is the contract purchaser. It's conditioned upon, his purchase is conditioned upon the approval of the plan. So what I'd like to do, I'll tell you how we're going to try to use the remaining minutes that we have. I'd like to introduce our team. I'll tell you, I'm not going to go through all of the members of the team because you have that in your material, but I'd like to tell you who's here in attendance tonight, and we'll be happy to answer any questions or respond to comments. We have Carmen Iosu is here with his daughter, Nicole Mertens, and they are the owners of the property along with other members of the Iosu family. Greg Van Schaak, Carmen is a longtime Lake Forest resident. Greg Van Schaak, coincidentally, is also a Lake Forest resident. He's been a long time in leadership position at Hines Company, which is a worldwide real estate development company. They have developed major office properties and multifamily properties. Greg has been responsible for those developments in the Chicago area and the suburbs. There's a lot of material of projects that he's done. You know, an example would be Wolf Point and say the 1.2 million square foot workforce building that I think, who's a law firm that just, Kirkland & Ellis just signed a 600,000 square foot lease there. So between Kirkland & Ellis and Workforce or Salesforce, they occupy almost the entire building. So the point is, Greg is very experienced with very complex projects. He recently retired from Hines Company. He's been there 36 years. He doesn't look like he's old enough to have worked anywhere 36 years, but I'll believe it if he tells me, so I'm good with that. But he's very accomplished, and we're really happy to be associated with Greg. Greg's architect is Joe Antunovich from Antunovich Associates. He and his associate are here this evening to discuss the apartment building. Nick Batera, our land planner, is here, and many of you may have seen Nick from time to time over the years at different presentations here. Ron Adams, our civil engineer, is present to discuss any, or respond to any questions. Carol Wolben-Mead is here from Mariani. They're our landscape designer. Ron Adams, our civil engineer, I think I just mentioned. Brendan May from KLOA is our traffic engineer. And Richard Sugar is our attorney. And he's attending here this evening. And Peter Friedman from Elrod Friedman is Mr. Van Schaak's attorney. So what I'd like to do, I'd like to have both Carmen and Greg as principals just introduce themselves to you. And then we're going to have Nick Batera walk through the site plan. And then and he'll talk a little bit about the coffee shop as well, the elevations of the coffee shop, and how, well, you'll see the plans and the modification that we needed to make to the site plan to accommodate that and to get the coffee shop's approval. And then Nick will turn it over to Joe Antunovich, the apartment building architect. And Joe is a very accomplished architect, and I would go into his projects, but they're too numerous, and we would exhaust our time just talking about Mr. Antunovich's projects. So, Joe, we might have to put a shot collar on you when we get close to the end of the 20 minutes here. And then after that, I'll answer any other questions that might have come up and we'd like to be responsive to you, and we'd like to move this project forward. The important thing to us is this property's been vacant for 15-plus years. We have a really good plan. Just quickly, when Carmen and Nicole and their family was considering changing from the medical office building to an apartment building, the concern was this, that we have a market that is unpredictable with respect to pre-leasing office space, and particularly medical office space. And so we wouldn't start the building until we had certain pre-leases. But the multifamily market is healthy, as I had mentioned, and as I'm sure you know, and that is very financeable. And so it was predictable that this is a project that can start in 2024. If we maintain the medical office building structure, we don't know when it would start. We don't know when we would enter into a lease because we haven't had sufficient interest or sufficient demand at this point. So with that, Carmen and Greg, if you'd step up and just each say a few words to the commissions, and then hand it over to Nick Patera.
Thank you, Jack. I'm Carmen Iosu, and I've been a over 30-year resident of Lake Forest and raised my 6 children here through the public schools. And I love the community. We're the owners of 1025 Everett Road. Some call it acute care building, but we're full. We have dentists, we have McDonald's, we have a lot of people, and we also have a great relationship with the church and what have you. So we've been very, very happy here and part of the business community. However, it got old looking at vacant land year after year after year. And my wife, who's not here, said, Carmen, we got to do something. And here we are. Our development objectives are to create a high-quality campus that is pedestrian-friendly, an attractive gateway to and from Lake Forest, West Lake Forest. We aim to make a long vacant property attractive and productive to our community. And we're very proud of the work you're going to be seeing, because we think it is going to really be great for West Lake Forest and the community of Lake Forest. I'd like to introduce Greg Van Scott.
Good evening. My name is Greg Van Scott. I live at 50 South Orchard Circle in Lake Forest, and I retired from Heinz after a 36-year career in development in about a year and a half ago. I had my eye on sites for a while just to do on my own with a limited team, smaller scale, of course, and this site attracted my interest right away. It's across the street from Metro Station. It's across the street or within a block of Sunset Foods and great retail. There's some great restaurants nearby, and obviously medical, and then coffee would be a big plus to have adjacent to it also. I really have seen in the suburbs, really the North Shore suburbs starting to embrace, and I think Lake Forest was a leader in this embrace, boutique multifamily rental housing, which is these buildings are attracting renters of choice, not of need. Empty nesters who spend 5 months and 29 days in Illinois. And also, some smaller units for teachers and coaches and people like that are here maybe seasonally also. This site will undoubtedly attract empty nesters in this village and keep them in this village, and it will provide housing for other people that work and want to live here and send their kids to school here. This will be the 4th project that I've worked on with Antunovich Architects, and I'd rather save my time and let Joe speak further when it's his turn. But thank you for the opportunity to be here. Nick?
Good evening, Nick Patera, Tesca Associates, and our role here is working with the team to consolidate some of the architectural together with the site planning, the engineering, and landscape architecture into one cohesive development. This is the opportunity you have with a plan like this to create a campus where the landscape matches. It doesn't look like you've got kind of a separate ice cube tray that holds, one use like a coffee shop and a separate use for the acute care and a separate use for the medical office. What you're seeing here is something that has a very coordinated and integrated theme to it. And you'll see more about the architecture. Some of the comments that have been talked about have to do with making it a pedestrian-friendly location. You'll see that there's walkways that connect through. It's not just for our own self to say I can walk from my residence to the coffee shop or from the coffee shop to the medical, but it also invites residents who are nearby to be able to walk in. It's not just car-centric only. The other things I want to call to your attention, and I'm going to, will this advance, Kathy? Yep. Oh, yep, okay. So this is the site plan. I don't know if these come up on your monitors, but what you're seeing is at the top right corner, the building that Carmine Iosu had mentioned as his building, his family's building, is the existing building that you would recognize today. The coffee shop building is the top left building, and then the residential building is the cornerstone at the southwest corner. What you're seeing is that the buildings are street-facing as best as we can, so that the view from Waukegan Road, the view from Everett, doesn't accentuate parking, but what have we done with the parking? We're showing architectural front and live people-occupied space. That's important from a gateway, iconic type building to Settlers Square business district, to say that there's lights on here. It's not just set back behind a parking lot like you would see for some of the other retail buildings. Sunset, as much as we love them, it's a parking lot in front, and that's the first thing you see. That's what we didn't want to have here. So the other elements on the site plan, we can go into greater detail, but has to do with lush landscape around the perimeter. There's none better than Mariani in town here, and we've worked together with them to integrate the perimeter landscape as a strong buffer, and the parking is really tucked back in, and they're almost like parking rooms with lush canopy trees and perimeter landscape. There will be fencing on the south side up against the villas, and on the east side up against the chateau residential community with low-level type lighting. I'm going to come back and talk a little bit more, but the idea of having a mixed-use development where we have 24-hour citizens is also very appealing, because it's not just medical office and coffee shop that kind of turns the lights off at night and you're wondering what happens there after hours. It will have people living here, and I think that that's appealing from a community-wide point of view. I know we're getting close on time, so I'm going to turn it over to Joe, and he can explain a little bit more. I should also, before I do this, the integration of the buildings has to do with the coffee shop itself. As you see, there's some familiar architecture, and Joe has looked at this, and we have looked at his and tried to say this is a matched set, so that these different views, as we go through this, we can come back and talk about what's facing Waukegan, what's facing Everett, or what's facing the interior. The front door of the building will have a courtyard plaza. But I'm going to step down because we're running time here. So, Joe, you're next up. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Good evening. I'm Joe Antunovich, president of Antunovich Associates. I've worked in Chicago for, 45, almost 50 years now. I came as a very young lad. I worked at the old office of Mies van der Rohe and then started my own firm in 1990, and so worked with many people in this room. Kathy and I go back many years, worked on a number of projects in Oak Brook. I'm thrilled to be working with Greg. We worked on the redevelopment of the old Children's Hospital in Lincoln Park, and those of you who have been there lately, it's something to be seen. It's beautiful and something that integrates wonderfully and creates a new center for Lincoln Park. And also some of our work is also for DePaul University. We've built over 20 buildings at DePaul, most recently the new music school. And if you've not been there, I invite you to go there. It's just fabulous. I am a little familiar with Lake Forest. My daughter went through Woodlands Academy here, that wonderful school with Sister DeMoussier, for those of you who are a little bit older. And that's where I met Frank Mariani, who his daughter was going through school with me. So what do they say in Chicago? It's really one big family place. So it's so I do have a real knowledge of Lake Forest, having brought my daughter to that school for over 4 years on a weekly basis. We're thrilled to be here as architects for the apartment building. The apartment building that you see here is a 4-story building. It has 32 units, 8 units per floor, and it has larger units. Most of the units are 3 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms and a few 1-bedrooms, so that we cover all of the width of demographics for people who would occupy the building. I think Greg mentioned that it's just not for people who are empty nesters, but that, heck, maybe there is a softball coach who wants to live here in town and not do the commute and be close to people that are being coached by him. So the building, we've developed this building really as you say you're going to build in Lake Forest. What is the most iconic building in Lake Forest but the Deer Path Inn? And so this building has connotations of the Deer Path Inn. You can see the Tudor Revival recall of this building. And as we go by this site, we see other commercial buildings to the north that are developed in a very similar vernacular. And what we want to do is be able to fit in with our surrounding neighbors. We have 4 stories, and I know some people have said, gee, it's a tall building, but it's really a building that's no taller than the medical office building that was approved here previously. That building was approved at 49 feet. Our building here is 54 feet to the top of the gable. If you actually took a line at the bottom of the gable, our regular roof, we're at 49 feet. But I think to build a residential building here in Lake Forest with a flat roof would be the wrong thing to do. And so our building, with the peaks of the roof, the gables, take us to 55 feet, and we also use those gables to enclose the mechanical on all sides so that you will not see any of the rooftop mechanical equipment from surrounding areas. This is another view of the front door, the main entrance to the building, and you can see that the building will be set in the lush Mariani landscaping that will surround the building on all sides. The parking lot, there's been some questions about, oh my goodness, that parking lot will just be a large blacktop area. No, it'll be a heavily landscaped parking lot with trees in the center median and trees up against the building as illustrated on our landscape plan. I mentioned that we've used the Deer Path Inn as a recall for our building, and you can start to see how we've taken many of those elements from that beautiful building and incorporated them into our building. The breakup of the windows, the more metal 1920 windows, the gable roof, the brick masonry on the exterior, the stone base, the entire first floor wrapping all the way around the building will be a stone, very similar to what you find at the Deer Path Inn. an aerial view that shows our building with the Starbucks on the corner, and then the existing office building just around the east side of the Starbucks on Everett. The site plan, parking was mentioned by some people who have looked at this plan. We are proposing 68 parking stalls for our building, which will be for the 32 units. So we have an average of greater than 2 parking stalls for every apartment that we have. And as I mentioned, the parking lot that will serve our building is immediately to the east, to the bottom of the page. And we do have 10 garages, which will be developed in a similar vernacular to the building. We feel that that will shield our neighbors to the south, and also keeping this fence and also the landscaping that will occur on the east side of the property will provide a really excellent sheltered area to our neighbors to the east. We actually will be blocking the noise of Waukegan Road from our neighbors who are further south, further to the east of us, and also the train noise from the trains that go by further across the street.
Can I interrupt you if I could, please? We've gone past the 20 minutes here. Is out of the petitioner's team, who's going to address the parking issues and sort of the spacing issues? I mean, we can go into the details of the building itself, but, and specifically, I guess there's the city engineer's preliminary comments that were done in regards to the space and the parking configuration. I know that was.
I believe Mr. Frigo will go through
Okay,
those.
great.
I'll just be a couple of more minutes and I'll be done and sit down and
Okay,
and then get on. I'm almost done. So this is just a simple plan of the entry and then the units on the first floor. You can see there are step out areas for each and every apartment on that ground floor, surrounded by the landscaping. And our units vary between almost 1,500 square feet for the 3-bedroom units down to 1,250 square feet, 1,250 for the 2-bedroom units. These are just plans that we've laid out, and as you go up the building, these are elevations that show the stone base, the brick, the half-timbered appearance that we've taken from the Deer Path Inn, and then the roof, the gable roof that we've sheltered the mechanical room and areas on the roof from the surrounding neighbors. And here, just the other elevations of the building. And I'll turn it back to Mr. Frigo and anyone else that needs to. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy, we did our best on the 20 minutes. So, Chairman, with regard to the parking spaces, Brendan May from KLOA will address that, the parking load and the number of spaces. Nick Patera can also assist with that. One thing that I look at, a couple of key points, is the change from the medical office building to the apartment building. The 32-unit residential project has a peak demand per KLOA of 42 parking spaces. The medical office building, we had allocated 90 parking spaces for that. And important in the context of the community and the circulation at the interchange in the area is the number of daily trips for the residential units are 106 compared to just over 1,000 for the medical office building. So the change in the uses here really diminishes the trips per day in and out of the site. As Nick mentioned, there's reciprocal parking and ingress-egress easements throughout the property. So all of the parties, the different three uses, can come and go through any of the, entrances and exits. Brendan, would you be able to address the parking counts?
And Jack, what might be helpful is specifically, just to keep this moving along here, is specifically looking at the city engineer's preliminary comments in the letter dated September 7th. I'm sure you have a copy of that, but there are about 10 items on that letter that might be a good place to start addressing.
Then I'll start, okay? I've got that, yeah, I'll take care of that right now. Brendan will assist as well, but let me see, this is the GHA letter. The first point that they make is the access to Everett Road has been reduced to a single outbound lane, and our original plan had three. We had an inbound, a left turn lane, and an inbound and an outbound lane. What we've done on that, and let me get to the site plan.
I'm sorry, what direction?
Say that again?
What direction are you talking?
This is the Everett Road. Well, the Everett Road, you can go right or left. So you can go, you can't go northbound on Everett Road. You can go east or west. And so I want to get to the site plan, which might help. There we go. Okay. So in the top right corner, is there a laser on this, Kathy? In the middle. There we go. Okay. So that's what item number 1 is on the engineer's comment. So our original plan had 3 lanes, one that would go to the right, one that would be inbound, and one that would go to the left. And what we've done on this plan is to reduce that to 2 lanes. So there's an inbound and an outbound lane. We've made them wider than normal by flaring it at Everett Road. And we have done that so we could preserve the tree that is right there. So we have more green space. There's about a 50-year-old locust there, and we'd like to preserve that. What I've discussed with Kathy and our team is that we view that as a land bank, that if for some reason, after we are operating, if the city or the police department doesn't feel that it's operating properly, we will take the tree down and add a 3rd lane, but we would rather not. So that's my response to the engineer's comment. Item 2 is let's see, there's a shortage of parking. We have substantially more spaces available to us than just our site. So we have an arrangement with the Archdiocese and St. Mary's and St. Pat's to park 20 cars on the St. Mary's site. And Carmen and Nicole have had a 10-year relationship with the church where we lease those spaces, and our staff is required to park there, the staff of the 1025 Everett Road building. We also have an arrangement with St. Pat's to be able to utilize another dozen spaces directly across. So we really exceed what the parking load is just by parking on land that we already have arrangements for. The item 3 on the engineer's report says, let's see, the north side of building C, right there, these are the west-facing spaces. And I think that there's currently 2 spaces there. We put in a 3rd space, but I think that the engineer's comment is a valid comment, and that is that the northernmost of those 3 spaces would be challenging to back out. The 2 existing spaces, the 2 southern spaces that are west-facing, you can do that maneuver. And I've done it, and Carmen's done it, and Nick Patera has done it, and the visitors to the building have done it. So, you know, we might lose a parking space there. That might be a good space to, one of the other comments was that we needed to add a handicap space. The engineer was recommending 5 handicap versus 4. And that would be a good space to do it because we would have the northernmost space to crosshatch and accommodate the regulations for a handicap space. So I think that we can address and resolve that, Chairman. Let me just go to the next one. The drive aisle on the east side of the building is 20 feet wide, and he feels that it needs to be 24 at a minimum. We wish we could do that. We can't. That's the space right there. It's currently 18 feet wide. There's a stripe down the middle. Cars have navigated that. However, what we are doing is we are moving the west curb 2 feet to the west, closer to the building. And that's as far as we can move it because we're up against the window wells and the foundation of the existing office building. Unfortunately, we can't move the curb to the right, to the east, because there is a 4-foot drop-off in the grade at that location, and there's a substantial stormwater catch basin as well as the pipes and the improvement. So we'd have to relocate the entire stormwater infrastructure there in order to pick up another foot or two. What we've discussed with our civil engineer, with Nick Patera, and also with KLOA is, can 2 cars pass safely in opposite directions at 20 feet? And the answer is yes, they can. So it would be challenging if it was a truck, but passenger vehicles can do that. If it was a truck, somebody would just have to wait and they would have to navigate around the truck when it would come through. But we have done, we've made this as wide as we can in the plan, so we cannot accommodate that comment of the engineer. There'll be a line in a center stripe and signage. Let's see, the developer should confirm that they've maintained contact with IDOT. This plan has been submitted to IDOT, and we do have contact with IDOT on this. It's important to know that these locations, there are today 7 curb cuts on all of this on this property. We're reducing them to 3. The plan that had been preliminarily approved by IDOT was the waterway plan, which is a popular subject. They had a write-in and a write-out at that location, and we've closed that. So we are down to 3 spaces, and let me just comment. So we feel very confident that IDOT will approve this. IDOT is cumbersome in terms of getting the approvals, but once we get their response, we'll then engineer the curb cuts. Item 6 is the 10-foot right-of-way. So this area here, it may be hard to see for those in the audience, but the north part of the Iosu property, just north of the coffee shop, is land that the city and IDOT would like to expand Everett Road to the south. Mr. Iosu has said he absolutely will cooperate. We've had a couple of meetings with Kathy and IDOT on this matter. We've met on the site and we've met at the Public Works building. We're going to cooperate. Our building right now complies with setbacks 100%. We can also give them the land and still have sufficient space to do the drive-through lanes. So that is in response to item 6. Item 7, minimum parking lot depth is 18 feet. The parking depths shown vary, but there is little as 16 feet. So I think what the engineer is referring to there are these spaces here. And per the code, and Kathy and Nick can confirm this, that if the nose of the car is a budding landscape, an area as opposed to a hard surface, that a 16-foot depth of the parking space is acceptable. Kathy, is that accurate? That's my understanding of the code.
I would have to check with the city engineer.
Okay.
We can verify.
All right. Nick, that's your understanding, yes? Isn't it? All right. So we'll verify that. Item 8 on the engineer's plan, or note, minimum of 5 accessible parking spaces. There are only 4. Since we trip over the 100 space number here, we need to have 5. And I mentioned that this would be a good place to do it, so we can accommodate that. So the northernmost space of the west-facing spaces for the medical office building, and that would be a good place for it as well. Let's see, the grading of the southeast of Building C, so I'm going to take a crack at this. Ron Adams is our engineer, and I think that this is what the city engineer is talking about. And basically, we can accommodate him. It's not the difference in the topography and the elevation isn't such, that's not an area where somebody would be walking. But nevertheless, we can accommodate that. And given some of our work, recent work with KLOA, we think that it might be helpful to soften the radius of that turn in any case. So we can address that and we can accommodate that concern. Okay, item 10, auto turn should be run for various vehicles. We agree. We did that for our previous plan and it worked. We have made a couple of site plan modifications here, which you've seen, this being one. We've closed that drive aisle there to accommodate the coffee shop's partners, their staff. That was a requirement in order to reach agreement with them. So KLOA has run some auto turn diagrams, and they have pointed out a couple of points where we could soften the radius and be more successful. There is one spot, there is another spot for a truck coming in there. This site does not accommodate semi-trailers. Maybe it could, but it really is not built for that. So somebody moving in would be moving in, and the requirement would be a box trailer, a box vehicle of some sort. It does fit garbage trucks. It does fit delivery trucks that deliver to Starbucks. But the engineer's comment to, we should run an auto turn diagram for semis. We're not going to do that. We know it doesn't work for semis. So we can't accommodate that request. So that responds to the engineers. Kathy will be happy to respond in writing. Chairman will respond in writing, which will provide more detail, and actually will provide some diagrams for the auto turns, and we'll be able to make some changes to that and that area that will accommodate the engineer's concerns.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you for those comments.
Kathy, there were some points in your notes that I wanted to clarify. Is it all right, Chairman?
Well, why don't we you'll have a chance, Jack, to rebut and come back after we hear from the city and after we hear from some members of the public.
I'm not going to rebut Kathy. I'm just going to clarify a few
Okay.
things. Also, Chairman, one other comment. We've introduced the folks that are here, and so some of us have any one of us will be happy to speak and address you, but I'd like to leave a couple of minutes before we close in the event that Richard Sugar or Peter Friedman have any comments or observations that they'd like to make, because most of what we're talking about here is planning, and I respect that, and it's really constructive to hear your comments. But in the event that they have some comment they'd like to make, I'd like not to adjourn before they have a chance to. Okay?
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Certainly this site has been the topic of a lot of conversations before the Plan Commission. And some of you have been involved in reviewing multiple plans for this site. So the city would very much like to see this site develop. It's an important site, it's a prominent site, but it also is a challenging site. The configuration of the site, all 3 parcels together, it's challenging because it does have access limitations. It's very close to the intersection. Both Everett Road and Waukegan Road are busy. We've all probably been at that intersection when there's been backups. We do have improvements planned to that intersection to add some turn lanes. So we're still continuing to work in that direction, trying to get some grant funding for that. The petitioner has certainly put together an impressive team and has spent a lot of time on putting this new plan together. And to be clear, this is a new plan. This isn't simply a revision to the previously approved plan. This is coming in as a new plan, and it really requires us to step back and look at it that way. A couple of key changes. As were noted, the medical office building is now replaced with a multifamily residential. The comprehensive plan does talk about bringing residential close to, into the business districts, both the Central Business District and the Waukegan Road Settler Square District. The previous plan received variances for parking with the thought that employees in the office building, in the medical office building, both the existing building and the new medical office building, could be directed to park off-site, both on the north side of Everett Road, in the church lot, which is where some employees currently park, but there was also a discussion about employees parking in the city lot, in the south end of the city train station lot, recognizing that there's always spaces there and that was within walking distance. If you were in the city, you'd certainly walk that far. With a residential building, you really can't expect residents or guests to park off-site. So there really does need to be adequate, convenient, comfortable parking on the site. Based on our count, there are 63 spaces that would be required for the residential building. The code states that 33% of those spaces should be open and reserved at all time for visitors. So that would limit the number of spaces that could be allocated to each unit. Overall on site, we calculate 92 spaces on site based on a reading of the code that is that uses the lowest parking requirement for the coffee shop. It appears that 112 spaces would be required by a strict reading of the code. The coffee shop does have a range, so we've used the lowest range, and perhaps that's appropriate with a double lane drive-through, but city staff, including the city engineer, we are concerned about the adequacy of parking on the site. We are also concerned about circulation. This site is tight. There's a lot proposed on this site. The engineer feels strongly that to the north of the 1025 building, that third access lane onto Everett is really crucial because of the way traffic backs up there. The tree that would be removed, it's not an oak tree. It's a decades-old locust tree. It certainly is a lovely tree, but if we're going to build this site, I think it's important that we try and get it right at the outset and not have to come back. The dead end of that parking area in front of the 1025 building is a concern to the city engineer. Just because of the maneuvering, it's difficult to maneuver in there now, but with the limited access to the coffee shop itself doesn't have an access directly into it. So vehicles will need to move through the site. The Plan Commission's focus really is on appropriateness of uses. Certainly a mixed-use development on this site is consistent with the comprehensive plan and is consistent with the B1 zoning district. The zoning district's purview is the functionality of the site plan. And I think that's where we'd really like your thoughts tonight. We certainly want to give the petitioner clear direction. We understand that time is of the essence and that we want to move this forward. So we, to the extent we can, give very clear direction tonight so that modifications can be made. Our engineers can meet with their engineers and work through different issues. I think that would be helpful. As we look at the site plan, we heard tonight that this is a pedestrian-friendly campus, and really thinking through those pedestrian access ways through the site. This plan does absolutely provide pedestrian access along the perimeter. along Everett and Waukegan, providing that access that we've heard from others from a long time is really desired for buildings to the east, for residents that live to the east and to the south, to have a comfortable and really a pedestrian welcoming way to get to Sunset or the train station. So this plan certainly accomplishes that. As we think about the on-site circulation, we also want to look at the locations of the trash enclosures, which are shown on the property, and really think through deliveries, moving trucks, how all of those operate on the site, while we're also trying to accommodate parking and vehicles that are moving through the site to get to different parts of the site. The design aspects, the massing of the building, the materials, the design elements, the landscaping, those at the appropriate time would all be sent to the Building Review Board for review. The various approvals requested from the Plan Commission, there is a subdivision requested, which is different from last time. And thinking through the timing for that subdivision and how we continue, and I heard a commitment from Mr. Frigo, or an acknowledgement that we really do need to look at this as a consolidated site before we kind of split it off. There will need to be cross easements. But as we look at a subdivision, look at a special use permit for the reconfigured drive-through. The drive-through now is proposed with 2 lanes, which tightens that area of the site a bit. And variances, again, variances for height, parking, and zoning setbacks. The last aspect I'll mention that the city engineer raised concern about is, unlike the past plan, the coffee shop is requiring on-site parking for their employees. So there is an area on the plan that you'll see that is designated as employee parking. For cars that are entering the drive-through, that could at time hem in some of those cars from backing out of those parking spaces. So it's a bit of an unusual configuration, but again, that's something that the city engineer called out. So in summary, really looking at the overall site plan, giving your thoughts so that we can start at that point, get the site plan right, and I'm confident with the professional team that they've presented, we can then work through the various design aspects. I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any questions or requests from clarification from fellow commission members, either to city staff or to the petitioner?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll ask a couple questions. Some for the petitioner. For the coffee shop or Starbucks, how do you anticipate that deliveries get made to that that store? Is a semi gonna pull up and park on the street and then shuttle items in, or how would that work?
The deliveries, thank you for the question. The deliveries would be at the south end of the Starbucks site. If they do have a truck that would be sitting and waiting, that's it. There's a loading area that's set aside that's going to be shared by both the residential building and by Starbucks as you enter in off of that Waukegan Road. I'm sorry I moved off of that, but it's this strip on the north side of the residential building.
Okay.
That would be then hand truck up to the entrance to Starbucks at that location. I suppose that during off hours there could be deliveries, made directly into the Starbucks, but we don't see them going into the queuing lanes at all.
So if they pull into that loading area, if it's a truck, a semi, or some sort of truck,
Deliveries, right.
would they then have to back out onto Waukegan?
No, they absolutely not. The route that they would take would be looping through and back out. This is cutting out. Back out to Waukegan this way. This is a three throated intersection, so they could come out of here and wait and make a southbound or wait and make a northbound. So that would be the circulation route. They could potentially, if it's a small enough, like a UPS or Amazon scale truck, make this turn as well. but generally it's a clockwise circulation around the outer perimeter of the residential parking lot.
So a semi could make that journey?
That's one of the things that we'll double check, but yes,
Okay.
that's the intent.
On the apartment building, some of the units are 3 bedrooms. My question is, are you going to promote this to families with children?
That's
Or
probably
is
a
this,
different
is this being
question.
marketed to another demographic?
Thank you. Greg Van Skok again. I think that our experience has been less than 10%. So it's possible that some families with children could come here, but that is not really the target audience. In Oak Brook, we're in a similar situation, and it's less than 10% of I think it's 6% of the units have children or families.
Okay. Have you given any consideration to green space for outdoor activity?
You know, this obviously you look at the site. It is, as Kathy said, it's tight, it's challenging. There really just isn't the space available there, but obviously Lake Forest offers multiple options for that.
Okay. And then just to confirm the height, I don't know if you're the right person on your team, but
Yep.
the medical office building was 49 feet as approved, and the proposal is 55 feet, is that correct?
54, I believe.
54?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's really just due to architecture
Okay,
on the
54.
outside.
Right. Okay.
I think that there is just a little bit of room in that, but what we're trying to do to attract the renters by choice, people want high ceilings in their units, and so we want to have 10-foot high ceilings in these units. We want them to be elegant and gracious. We want a lot of natural light to come in. So this is really a condominium building financed as an apartment building, is the way I look at it design-wise.
And have you considered underground parking at all for this?
No, it would be completely cost prohibitive to develop such a small building.
Okay.
We'd need a 200-unit building to do something like that.
Okay. And then Kathy, one question for staff. With respect to the I don't know what petitioner calls it, but the carport on the south end of the property. My question is, are there other examples of that type of parking in this area or in Lake Forest that we could consider in conjunction with this?
The villa, and we have people here, I'm sure that can speak more in a more educated way to this, but the villas have parking underneath the building. Off the top of my head, I can't think of another situation where we have detached, single-story garage elements.
Okay. Okay, those are all my questions.
Ms. Moorhead, just to clarify on the open space, I mean, every unit or most units have either outdoor patio spaces or terraces outside, so there's a little bit of outdoor space in each.
Sure. Very good. Thank you.
No questions from me at this time.
I have some questions. In terms of the height, I just wanted to clarify that you had said, Kathy, that the previous approval that was done by the plan for the medical building does not hold for this, that it's a new slate in terms of approving it. Am I correct on that?
Correct.
Okay, so because I'm looking at the previous building, and yes, it went up to 49 feet. However, the floors only went up to 39 feet, 10 feet. It was an actual fixture part that made it go up to the 49. It wasn't the whole floor going across. So that was at 49. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then the other question I have, I guess, Kathy, what is the usual height in a B1 zoning that is allowed for? I mean, we don't have any complexes like this that they're suggesting in terms of people living in it, just no medical or restaurants or whatever.
The overall outright permitted height in the B1 zoning district is 35 feet. In the Waukegan Road Southern Square Business District, there have been other height variances granted, not for residential buildings. I believe Lovel's received a height variance. The buildings that have the tower elements, Forest Square, and I believe Private Bank, which is now,
Something, yeah. So it's the clock, like you're talking about the clock and like the clock. Okay, sorry, thanks. So, okay, thank you very much for that. The other question that I had in terms of the parking, and I'm not sure, and you had mentioned, the petitioner, you had mentioned about parking places, and I'm getting a little confused. You said you had St. Patrick's and you had St. Mary's, but in the actual study of the turn study, it just says St. Mary's and it says 15 and you said 20. So I'm just kind of curious because I worry about a safety issue and I'm concerned in the safety issue especially. So how much parking do you actually have negotiated with St. Patrick's and St. Mary's, and clarify that first?
We currently use parking at St. Mary's at the school, and we use 20 spaces there. And the agreement that we have had for 10 years, plus or minus, provides the option to expand the spaces if we need. And there is economic impact by expanding. So depending upon how many spaces we use, we compensate the Archdiocese with that. I did mention St. Pat's. So we met with the Monsignor there, and we have an arrangement to utilize up to a dozen spaces directly across the street. The easternmost spaces, if you look at an aerial at St. Pat's, and we can park there if we needed. We've never needed to. We haven't taken advantage of that. Right now, the behavior of our tenants is that they park at St. Mary's, and that works out great. I don't think you were on the commission at the time, but we had, at our previous committee, we had letters from Bill Mackesy, who's the owners of Mackesy Investments, who own quite a few McDonald's. Their offices are on the second floor of 1025. They provided a letter that confirmed that their staff parked across the street. They had no difficulty with that. Dr. Mark Mass, who's on the first floor, provided a letter as well, and we can get those to you, but I think Kathy may have them in the file. But they also indicated that their staff parks across the street, and there's no issue with that with respect to staff or safety. And both of those parties recently renewed their leases and are very happy in the building.
Okay. Follow-up question to that is St. Mary's Parish over by the primary center, they don't have as much activity as St. Patrick's Church in terms of obviously the services and different activities of that. And if you're talking about with residential and all that, a concern would be if you're saying people have to park off-site, well, what happens if you have First Communion or you have something of that nature? Nobody's going to have parking, especially the people trying to go to their parishes to actually either attend church or what have you. That would be, is that been mentioned as a concern?
Well, yes, we've addressed that with both the Monsignor as well as with the school. So the area that our tenants park in at St. Mary's is the southwest corner of the lot, which is the furthest parking space available, say, away from the school itself. So those would be the last spaces that a visitor or a family would park. With regard to St. Pat's, we've been very sensitive about that. Now, first of all, we've never needed to park at St. Pat's.
But I'm just asking,
I want to respond, and that is that we've discussed this with the Monsignor and his associate, and that is that we would develop a schedule. So if they did have a communion or a wedding or another event, they would just let us know, because we would reserve the spaces. For example, the 12 spaces that we would utilize at St. Pat's, we would have those designated and reserved parking for specific parties. And we would text them, and our agreement with them would be, if you receive this text, you can't park there. So we want to be very respectful, not to encumber their parking lot on some special occasions.
Okay, and then I just wanted to clarify in terms of when the engineer was talking about Building C with a right, left, and a straight turn lane, you were saying that you were going to be moving your curb? I wasn't really following that. I was trying to see it and I couldn't follow what you were trying to say.
We need to move a curb, but that didn't have anything to
Because
do with
that's a
the right
very
or
narrow
left.
drive right there. I mean,
Are you referring to
you're
that
right,
area?
yeah, and you go down, keep going down straight, there you go. That's
Yeah,
very
that
narrow.
area
You're
there-
talking about that curb?
Yeah,
Like moving that up towards your windows?
The west side of that driveway, which is the side that's closest to the building, we will remove that curb and install a new retaining wall 2 feet to the west, closer to the building. And we're limited at 2 feet because of the window wells that exist there in the building
Right,
foundation.
no, I just was trying to follow what you were saying on that. Thank you very
And,
much.
and, you know, I wanted to comment on Kathy dropped back and talked about two of the engineers' comments about the locust tree here, so maybe if it was an oak, it would be okay, but now it's a locust and that's not. You know, if it's a requirement to provide that at the onset, we could do it. We'd rather not, but that's not something that we couldn't do. So if the commission felt that that was important, and apparently the engineer feels that it's important, we would rather try it out and see if it works and preserve the tree. But if it's necessary to do that now, we can. And then with regard to the 3 spaces here, I can tell you for a fact that the 2 southern spaces there, the ones closest to the building, that works. You can park nose in and back out. You have to make a 3-point turn, but you can do it without interfering with the cars that are parked in the north aisle. But I think that the engineer's comment about the 3rd space, well, he didn't specifically talk about the 3rd space. He lumped them all together. But I think that the northernmost space of those 3 can be eliminated, and that would really be a good space, making the 2nd space, the middle space today, make that the 5th handicap space, because then we could have the crosshatch area, so it would make maneuvering even easier. So we can accommodate that concern.
Thank you, Mr. Frugo.
No more questions. I'll
Thank
ask
you.
more later. That's all right, thanks.
Are there members of the public here this evening that are wishing to speak on this matter? Yes, please come forward and state your name. Please come forward to the podium. Please come to the podium so you can be on the microphone there, and please state your name.
I'm Dave Jones. I live in Ward 4, just a little bit west of all this that's going on. But I have a stronger connection. I work special ed on the North Shore for 30-plus years, working with handicapped kids and wheelchairs and accessibility, all that stuff. I had kids at Deer Path and Cherokee and Lake Bluff, all the way down to Evanston to the Baker School down there. I like a lot of what you've done in terms of moving the curbs to making sure it's open. It is real tight. It is real tight. I was wondering where the other 4 handicap spaces are. Knowing the winters here in Chicago, if I end up in the 5th one and I drop my ramp to get back to my building, that would be a real challenge. Are the other ones closer to the entrance where I could drop a ramp down and get into the building more conveniently?
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Why don't we wait until, hold the answer to that question, but we'll get that addressed, or the petitioner will address that for you in regards to the handicap spaces.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else? Please. Please state your name.
I'm Gretchen Seidel. I live at 1111 South Waukegan Road, which is just south of this property. When we received the notification of the new plan, the 4 stories was a real concern. And I looked around at other apartment buildings in downtown East Lake Forest. They're not 4 stories. Even some of the new apartment buildings that they're building out in Vernon Hills by the mall are not that tall. So I don't see what the point is. I think it's going to decrease the quality of life for the immediate residents. I think it's going to look outsized along that corridor. Kathy had mentioned the height requirements, and you had brought up the clock towers and whatnot. This is much bigger than that. Even the Deer Path Inn that was used as a as an example for similar architecture, what they followed, that's 3 stories. So 4 stories, I think my neighbors would have my back on that, saying, whoa, that is too tall, it seems greedy. We're concerned too, so our buildings are condos with the ability to rent them out. We've had people renting, and the majority of the issues that we have with people not taking care of their property, not following through and all that are from renters, and it has not been made clear with the plans as to whether or not these are bought condos where people are going to have an investment, or whether it's a rental situation. That's something else that we'd like to figure out. And I hope that the commission, I'm sure you did, but I hope that you looked at where this fits in with the overall strategic plan. I know Kathy, that's part of her job. But I have questions as to whether or not it meets some of the safety and the needs of the residents. Also, the Starbucks, I'm concerned about that in that we have 2 Starbucks at each next light in the Marianos and currently in Settler Square. The one at Settler Square, I love going by and seeing the police sitting there talking with residents, kids going up on their bikes and scooters, and people walking from the train station to and from. My concern, although you have a patio in your plan, there's going to be less desire to sit on a patio when you've got the 2 lanes of drive-through speakers, people idling their cars. People are not going to want to hang out. I think even crossing that intersection, I do it multiple times a day, every day, and it's dangerous. The people people in cars aren't looking for pedestrians, period. We saw a slight improvement during COVID, but people are back to not paying attention. Many people have mentioned the cramped logistics of driving around this lot, and I just see potential for safety issues. And again, I don't think that's something that is easily solvable. But yeah, so those are my thoughts on the matter, and I would hope that this is considered really strongly for the whole plan. Again, would this fly in East Lake Forest? You know, I really hope West Lake Forest is treated with the same respect and consideration as the east side. And I understand the desire that it's been sitting vacant for so long. The idea of luxury sounds great, but I would be remiss to say that, you know, that property has been sitting vacant. It hasn't been cleaned up. There's still broken glass. The property line between the Villas of Lake Forest where I live and where this is, I mean, a fence panel is down. We still have, on my property, we still have debris from Pasquazzi's. The old roofing is there, and it's, you know, when we receive a letter saying, hey, we want to be good neighbors, and, you know, I would like some of that stuff to be taken care of as good faith as well, too. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments? Yes, please. And I just remind everybody, if the comments have been previously stated, you can say you agree with those comments just for the sake of moving this along, but thank you. Please state your name.
Elizabeth Springer, and I live east in the Lake Forest Chateau. And one of my main concerns as well was the height of the building. We have plantings, we have trees. I noticed that we are blocked already by a 3-story building with regards to light. And some of the plants along the road there don't survive very well. And that's a 3-story that's going, the 4-story building has obviously higher floors, so that's significantly higher. And I didn't hear what you said that the actual limit to height is.
Kathy's surname said 35.
35, was it 35? So this is significantly bigger than the limit. So I wonder why that's allowed. And then traffic, of course, is the issue. Walking, I agree with everybody else that's spoken. I do walk a lot around there, and already crossing across Everett and or Waukegan, and I ride my bike as well. Traffic's already quite busy there, and I do think they don't expect pedestrians. And then if there's going to be children coming into that neighborhood, it's not a neighborhood with a lot of children, little children, and I think that needs to be taken into account of as well, outside as well as inside the whole construct. If there's children going through there and there's a busy service with drive-through coffee, things like that. Bicycles, I've had my kids, they're grown up, but kids are all over the place. So I think that's an issue as well, putting a larger building with potentially children, and who knows how many children, into an area where there's not a playground, where there's not a place that they can go. They have to walk out, or they have to bike out, or they have to be driven out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I am Jill Kaz. I live at 1045 Marlane, and I don't know if any of you have ever been trying to go west on Everett at 3:15 when St. Mary's is just letting out. The line that goes back, and I mean from Waukegan, east, 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 east. It's a long, long line. So my question is, the people that are coming out of on Everett and they want to turn left, how is that ever going to happen? And my concern is that they're going to go right, and they're going to cut through Marlane to Waukegan, and our community is just not set up for that. We don't have any sidewalks. You know, it's not a heavily trafficked area. And so that's really my concern, is the cut through traffic that we may see coming through Marlane. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Yes.
Hi, my name is Dave Heckler. I live at 1066 Franz Drive in Lake Forest Chateau. And if you wait long enough, everybody covers the points that I had in mind. But I just want to echo a couple things very quick. The height is the concern. We're looking at that it's really 2 to 2.5 story building right now where the young woman lives, and the idea of nearly doubling that height. It seems oppressive and out of character for that area. That said, and I should have backed up originally before, my wife and I, we're in favor of development, and we think they've done a really good job in terms of the finishes, what they intend to do there. And as Kathy said, as others have said, it's a tricky space. It's tight. But the main concerns being the height and what Jill Kaz just said about the cut-throughs. We have people walking around that circle of Marlane and France Drive all the time. As she said, narrow roads. People already do cut through. And if you start really congesting that intersection, I think people are going to be looking, if they don't already know it, they're going to be looking for those opportunities to find a shortcut through that intersection. And we're not set up for it. If we have one car parked on one side, you know, it's only one car can get by. We're a community with older retired people walking around. I'm concerned for their safety. I'd like to see something work out. I'd like to not see the height be quite so high. I appreciate the opportunity to give the comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? People wishing to speak? Anybody? Any other final questions here from commission members, either to the city or addressing any of the public comments?
Just one, Kathy, can you just dimensionalize a little bit more about kind of anything historical around the the right-of-way at Everett and Waukegan there? What has been anticipated? I mean, I'm seeing on the schematic the 10 feet and the cutout on the turn. I'm very familiar with the intersection, have been at that intersection at 315. Have dropped kids at dance for years, the traffic there, but what's going on in terms of what is anticipated or intended for that?
I can walk you around the intersection. Southbound on Waukegan Road, a right turn lane that will go over the railroad tracks is planned. Eastbound on Everett Road, the left turn lane will be extended back to the west, because right now the left turn lane is very short. Right at Waukegan only accommodates 2 or 3 cars, so that left turn lane will be extended back to allow the through lane to queue up a little bit better. And a right turn lane eastbound on Everett onto Waukegan is planned. On the east side of Waukegan Road on Everett, the lanes will be widened, and Mr. Frigo referred to the land acquisition that's needed to widen those lanes on Everett Road. And then westbound Everett Road, near the rectory of St. Pat's, a right turn lane onto Waukegan. Westbound Everett on to northbound Waukegan is planned. That right turn lane would go pretty close to the rectory. So those are the various components as currently planned. IDOT has been in discussions for quite a while to acquire right-of-way from the church, from the Fifth Third Bank property, from the IOSU property. I know we've applied for grants. There isn't a time schedule for the plan yet. To accommodate some of the changes on Everett west of Waukegan Road, the railroad also has to make some changes to widen that crossing. So those are the various pieces that will be incorporated into the plan eventually, but I don't have a time frame.
Can I just follow up? Just to be clear on that, the eastbound on Everett, you said there's going to be a right-hand turn lane northbound to go northbound on Waukegan, correct? So there'll be a left-hand turn lane, a center lane, and then now a right turn lane.
Right onto southbound Waukegan.
So St.
So-
Ed's.
Okay, so I'm talking about, oh, I'm sorry, I said eastbound, going westbound.
We
on it.
need a
Yeah,
drawing.
right.
As
Yeah,
you're coming to
yeah.
Waukegan.
As you're coming to Waukegan, going west on Everett,
Yes.
there will be a right turn lane added. That's the plan right now. So there'll be
Yes.
there'll be a left-hand turn lane as it currently exists, right? And then the center lane, and now a third right turn lane.
Yes.
Got it, okay. Thank you.
But just so I'm clear, this is already obviously anticipated in this plan, and it doesn't really impact, I recognize the concerns about the tight space, but it, as currently, conceived, this is here, it's in this plan.
Yes, it is. Now, I will note, IDOT had approved the previous plan, or had been in communication on the previous plan. I'm not sure where the approval stood. They had been in communication on the plan before that. So IDOT will again need to weigh in. I don't know if IDOT, by virtue of this development or something similar to that, would have different requirements. But this plan, with the 3 areas of ingress, egress, with the limited right turn, right in, right out, at the access point that's closest on Waukegan Road to the intersection, those previously were approved by IDOT. I can't speak to what they would say currently.
And just for clarification, what IDOT's approved for ingress and egress to the property is one item, and item number 2 is what we just sort of went through, IDOT proposal for lane changes to the intersection of Everett and Waukegan Road. Is that true?
Correct. Those are 2 separate approvals.
Two separate
Yes.
IDOT items.
Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'd like to follow up on the handicap, because that was one of my later questions, so you beat me to it. In terms of the handicap for the parking, could you elaborate? Because I was just thinking about it when you were talking about snowbirds and people coming back, and a lot of people have canes, people are in wheelchairs and stuff like that, and you've got 2, and let me tell you, that's not, I was just curious where you're putting the
Question to
others.
city, or is
To
that
the petitioner, yeah.
Please, yes.
I'm going to use the green.
Why don't you go ahead and respond to the other questions, or take this opportunity to respond to the other questions that may have been raised? So please, go ahead.
Let's do the handicap. There's 4 of them. There's one up at the midpoint here in this parking lot. These are all parking on the east side of the drive aisle and clear of the stacking queue. That's the double stacking queue that's going into the Starbucks. So it's one here. There is a sidewalk and a striped out space. I know it's hard to see on this plan. And it also connects to the front of the 1025 building. So that's one. There's 2 more that are on this landscaped island with their stripe out areas in those locations. So that's number 3 and number 4. And then finally, there's one directly on the south side of the 1025 building at that location.
I'm only counting 4.
2 and 3 east of the apartment building.
Yes,
And the 4th one.
2, 3, 4. So it's 1,
So there's 4.
2, 3, 4.
Yeah. And then one we're looking at doing the 5th at the westbound.
Where's the 5th?
Up top. He wants to put the 5th one right there.
The west. Yeah. That would be there's 3 spaces there now on the plans that you look at. And we've agreed that that would just be 2 spaces and then a blank out that could be accommodated for striping for handicap at that location. And there is a little sidewalk at that location as well that will either connect you up to the Everett Road sidewalk or we can bring you directly to the front door of the 1025 building. The 1025 building has a ramp on the south side of the building, and that's why we located the 4th handicap space on the south side. There's a handicap ramp that gets into the south part of the building. The building has elevator within it. There's also doors on the north side of this building that's not handicapped, but that's approximate to the loading area that we talked about that would serve both the residential building as well as we talked earlier about Starbucks. Then another item you should know about is that the east side of the residential building has a short-term lay-by parallel parking. I'm going to go pick up a friend at the residential building. It's short-term parking that's on the east side of that front door of the residential building. Was there something else that we were?
Yeah, the turnaround, like in terms of what the engineer was talking about, at first I thought I understood that no, like semis really couldn't fit in there, and then it sounded like when Commissioner Moore had asked a question that, oh yeah, they could go in and then they could go around the building. That was, so I'm kind of, is there enough turnaround like for fire, emergency? I'm just concerned because it just looks like it's very tight.
I don't think they've done that study yet. They
Oh,
said that they
sorry,
hadn't done that
I
study
missed
yet.
that, sorry.
I'm sorry, what did you miss?
No, the study, you haven't done the turnaround study.
That's right. So
Oh, I thought
we
you
have
had it
done a number of
Sorry.
the auto turns. We had previously done them, but we're updating them for this plan. We're doing the auto turn now for the fire trucks. We have done them for delivery trucks to the coffee shop, as well as smaller moving vans, not semis, for the apartments. But we'll show you updated for this. And it's instructive too to us that the auto turns that we've done so far are showing us how to make some improvements. So we're making improvements to the turning radiuses, so it will be a bit more gracious and comfortable to make those turns. So far, it doesn't look like we would lose any parking spaces, but notwithstanding some of the earlier comments, I don't think we really have a parking issue. I think that we have sufficient parking for the apartments. We've met the coffee shop's requirements, and the medical office building functions really nicely now, and we have the staff parking across the street there. So, so I think that we really do have sufficient parking on site. Could I respond to a couple of other comments? And then I'd like to talk about a few of Kathy's bullet points in her. So we talked about the tree, and so you understand how we feel about that for the third lane. The west-facing parking spaces in front of the 1025 building, Nick just described that, and I think that that would become the fifth parking, or the fifth handicap space. Let's see. In response to the locations of the handicap, Dave, you understand where those are. We'd be very interested to talk with you. We think that they're dispersed properly, but you have a lot of experience in that, so we'd be happy to talk to you if you have recommendations on if it would be better here than there and so on. Happy to discuss that. Gretchen had a question about rental or condos. These are rental apartments. Greg mentioned that these are renters by choice. These are fairly expensive units, although some smaller units would be able to accommodate a teacher and coach, et cetera. But these are designed as condos with respect to the level of finishes and quality, but they're going to be rented. And just as a practical matter, at least in the suburbs now, and probably in the city as well, it's very difficult to finance a condominium project because you need pre-sales. And while that occurs on occasion, it's very rare in this environment. On the other hand, the absorption of apartments is predictable. It has been for some years. And so that's a much more financeable type of project. And I can assure you this will be really well maintained. And as far as your comment about debris from Pasquesi being on your side of the fence, let us know. We'll take care of that. We had no idea of that. So we'd be happy to try to be a better neighbor in that regard. Let's see. With regard to the fourth floor of the apartment building, there were a number of comments about height. And for this project, and you've all recognized that it's a very difficult site. It wouldn't have been vacant for 15 plus years if it wasn't difficult. And it's challenging to fit the right kind of uses that are economically viable here. And the fourth floor, unfortunately, isn't discretionary. Like we can't say, well, why not? We'll make it 3. We can't do that. We don't have a project if that's the case. So, so I respect the comments about height, but we have this piece of property. You need to consider if it's appropriate for Westlake Forest in this location, if it would be good to make the overall site productive again and provide housing options for people in Lake Forest. That's your call. But this is something that works economically, and I have to tell you, it's fragile economically. We're in an environment where we have inflation. We also have increasing interest rates, 500 and some odd basis points in the last 12 to 18 months, and it doesn't look like we're done yet with that. So we're trying to hold this together, and so we hope to have your support. And I know in our last petition to do the medical office building, we had very constructive comments by the Plan Commission, and we've heard some really great comments today, and we'll accommodate as many as we can. If it's all right, Kathy, I'll take a couple of minutes and respond to a few bullet points I just wanted to clarify in your memo. It says the current plan does not yet reflect a distinctive corner landscape feature as was proposed in the previous plan, and that is true. So that's right there. And our designer, Mariani Landscape, just can't wait to get started on that. However, we need to resolve 3 things. 1, the IDOT equipment box. 2, the AT&T equipment box. And 3, IDOT's use of the corner. So what IDOT is proposing to acquire from the Iosu family, we want to be cooperative, but we have to work out a plan that is acceptable to them. So we want it to be safe for somebody that is going to be crossing Waukegan Road or Everett Road. And if they have a cup of coffee and they're waiting for somebody, there should be some kind of shelter there that they'll feel safe. We haven't designed that yet. We had an earlier design, but that was before the IDOT proposed taking. So we have that in our budget to do, and it's an important ingredient for us, important element. The architecture and massing of the coffee shop differs from the previously approved plan. True. Let me just see if I can get to that. There you go. So what we wanted to do here, the previous building that was approved, and it's in your package, was all brick. It was more of a reddish brick. It had a more complex roof system. And that was really done to try to merge, and you know, Diana Melikar in her office did, I think, a great job at it, but to try to merge the 1025 Colonial building with the medical office building, which was more, you know, more brick and had more height. And so that was designed to accommodate and to really fit with those and to be compatible with those. This, we looked at the Antunovich design of the apartment building, which we love. I think they picked up on the right elements of the Deer Path Inn, and so we like that. So we asked our architect to try to do something that would be compatible with that, but still also compatible with the Colonial building to the east. And so, yes, it's true that this is a different design, and we like this design. We think it is very compatible. Let's see, Kathy, you had mentioned, it's not in your notes, I don't think, but you had a question about the height of this building versus the previous design. They're almost the same. One was 22'1" to the ridge of the roof. That's this one. The other was 22. What is 26 feet is the chimney that you see there. And we thought that was a nice element to, say, add some texture to the building. But it's basically the same height, and the configuration, the footprint works. There was a comment earlier about delivery trucks to the coffee shop. And while there was some discussion going on, the representative of Starbucks came and just chatted with me for a moment, and he said the delivery trucks will be sized whatever size they have to be to deliver to the site. So they would like to be here. We would like them here. I think the community would like to see them here, and they will accommodate the deliveries accordingly. So a matter of schedule and size of vehicles. The site circulation, the East Drive aisle. We talked a little bit about the East Drive aisle, so I don't want to discuss that again. I think you understand that. The land bank notion for the locust tree, if that tree needs to go, it can go. You know, we want this project to be a positive, have a positive impact on the community, and we want it to be productive for the community. We want it to be productive for the property owners and Greg, the prospective developer. So we hope to get your support, and we're happy to work with you and the engineer and Kathy to try to arrive at a successful plan.
Thank you, Mr. Frigo. Thank you. Are there any other additional comments from staff?
Nothing further.
The testimony and comment period on this matter will remain open since no action is being taken here this evening, and no action is being requested to be taken here this evening. So at this point in the process, we'll just have discussion and comment just with the commission members ourselves here. And maybe I'll start off. You know, Mr. Iosu, Mr. Van Sack, Mr. Frigo, I think there's absolutely no question that you've assembled an incredible team to develop this site. There's obviously no question also for the high quality that you're trying to achieve for the development on this site. I, speaking for myself, would agree that to have this site developed, to have it be a gateway to this southern, western section of Lake Forest would be truly a gem. It's been an objective of the cities since probably even before Pasquesi left the site 15 years ago. We can go into some of the detail here, and I'm sure some of the commissioners will go into some of the detail, but my feeling with the comments that I just made was I think we're trying to do too much on this site, and I'm very respectful of the development that needs to take place to be able to recoup the costs. However, it truly does need to be balanced with the site in and of itself. We've talked about and touched on parking. We've talked about the flow. We've talked about a little bit about the height. I'm sure some of the height issues can be mitigated, but certainly from a safety standpoint, from a handicap standpoint, for the entire site, only to have 4 to 5 handicap spots for a medical building that's also on site. Medical building people tend to have limitations when they go to a medical building, and so to have only 4, I don't even know, and we could find out from the city, but it does seem like there's a limit to the handicap spaces. However, it certainly makes sense. The more handicap spaces you put in, the less parking spaces overall you're going to have. And with the site requiring 123 spaces and only with 100 maybe spaces that are there, needless to say, the parking is tight for that space as well. Even though there's the accommodations, which I certainly recall from the last time your team came up, Mr. Frigo, that there are numerous neighbors that are more than willing, including the city itself, that will allow for some of the parking. But that presents some other issues, and certainly if it's residential, that works in a commercial setting, in a commercial office setting, but certainly not for the residential space. But with that, maybe I'll turn it over and start on my far right to Mr. Davey.
No, I really don't have any comments. I think you just covered some of the concerns that were raised, and obviously the city's got a memo, and they've kind of laid out what our variances are going to need to be, and so I'm just curious to see how these are addressed as we go forward. So I don't have any other comments for y'all at this point.
I think I agree with everything you stated, Chairman Dixon. I think the bigger issue for me here is one, as a community, as a commission, as a city, that I don't think there's going to be a solution here that works for everybody. Either we're going to have to make exceptions to allow a plan that fits on this site, that that makes it economically viable. I think Mr. Frigo made a good point that as much as we'd love to shorten that building and chop off the 4th floor, it doesn't work then. And then we lose this, and the lot remains vacant for another 15 years. So I'm not saying that this plan to me works in its current format. I have some serious concerns with a number of the items mentioned. The height, the number of parking spaces doesn't concern me as much as the access on Everett and the narrow drive on the east side of Building C. All of these, everything in this plan, on paper looks good when you're thinking of a small Tesla and everyone's driving them these days, but in Lake Forest, we're kind of known for some really big cars, and if you look at an Escalade and a Yukon going opposite directions on that narrow drive, I don't know that you can make that turn there, right there. So, but trust me, I so badly, I live very close to this location. I want something on this lot. I'm sick and tired of seeing it vacant. I'm not sure what the solution is, but at some point, to get something that works in this space, someone's going to have to give something up. It might be an exception to height or other things, but we have to make that decision at some point. Tonight's obviously not that time, but I think that I'd like to see something happen on this lot.
Thank you, Commissioner Pasquesi. Commissioner Moorhead.
Thank you. I agree with most of the prior comments. I'll just say a couple specific items. Number one, the petitioner and the staff should go through the city engineer's report in detail and resolve those items, because as Commissioner Pasquesi mentioned, there's some material items in that. In the building height, the difference between 49 and 54 feet is 10%, which is not immaterial, although the petitioner, one member did say that the heights were the same. In my opinion, the height's too big for this space, and I'll to differentiate this from a medical office building. In a medical office building, the windows are all sealed, everything's internal. In a residential multifamily building, there's balconies, things are external. It'll have a larger effect, and if it's higher, that effect will be magnified. So the height, in my opinion, is too much. On the parking, I heard the concerns from staff that residents and their guests are not necessarily going to park at St. Pat's. That would work if it's an employer-employee relationship and the employee is designated or requested to park off-site. That really won't happen. So the St. Pat's, I appreciate it, but it seems like parking is still a major concern. I'd respectfully request staff and petitioner to consider underground parking. This commission has approved development in the last couple of years of smaller square footage, it's multifamily, but it's condo, which had underground parking, and that worked from a financial standpoint. So I would request that they at least consider that. I'm not saying all the spaces have to be underground, but if you take a portion and put it underground, that certainly would alleviate a lot of the challenges that we're seeing with the other aspects of the project. On the if you're proposing 3-bedroom apartments, it's not unreasonable to consider that the families are going to live there. I would, again, request consideration towards some sort of green space or how you are going to accommodate children or youth who will be accessing this via bicycle and foot and scooter, because it may have some design challenges. And then the last point, not casting aspersions on anyone, and I'm not really pounding the desk here like Khrushchev, but our job as a commission is not to consider the financial feasibility of a project. We are to just review this per the city code. If there's, if there's challenges outside of that, I think there's other parts of the city that consider that, but I don't think that's our purview. So I hear what petitioner's saying. I appreciate the basis points and the cap rates and the IRRs all in flux, but for purposes of our body, I don't think we consider that. And that's all I had.
Thank you, Commissioner Moore. Commissioner Pickus.
I'm in general agreement with just about everything else that's been said. Couple additional points to make. I know we talked about circulation. One of my big concerns is the cul-de-sac at the coffee shop. I think that's an issue that needs to be worked out, but I think it can be worked out, and I think that's just one of those things you might want to take a look at. The other item, 80% impervious on the site, that seems pretty excessive. So I know there's not a lot of opportunity for additional green space, but maybe do something to try to work on the impervious amount, because that's a lot, and it looks hard, a lot of hardscape there. So maybe something to think about when you're going through your redesign. That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Aaron.
I echo the same things that my other commissioners have said. I am concerned in terms of safety. Parking off-site, that's never a good thing, especially with residents and all that. And if you do have children, or you have a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old in their that could be big problems. The lack of parking is a big issue. I am concerned that the lane is so narrow going over to Everett. Everett is so busy. I mean, in the morning, it is wicked. And in the afternoon, not just at St. Mary's time, it's at 4 o'clock, 4:15, it is awful. The traffic is terrible. So to have that widened where you have a right and a left and you come in on that, I think it's really important. The height is a concern for me. It's different with the other buildings where it was a clock that made it go up a little bit more, or on 1025, it was whatever piece you had on there that made the building go up more. To have that, it's just too much for the site. I mean, I think it's a great idea, but I really believe full-heartedly it's too much. And just because, again, the safety, fire trucks being able to get in there, anything, handicap, being handicapped for a while, more. And let me tell you, you always wanted your handicap spot and you always wanted an elevator. So, you know what I mean, or ramps and stuff like that. And you want things wide enough so that you can get through, that you're not bumping. And I have a truck, so it's very narrow. Like when you're talking about that, there's no way. And people buy truck, I mean, we drive big cars, so that's just my concern. So, but I think it's a nice project in terms of an idea, but I think it's too much. Thank you.
I think the comment period here is closed, or not closed officially, but, you know, we've had the opportunity to speak. I'm looking to city for any direction on that.
I think we do have good direction. You've left the public hearing open. What I think I'm hearing is you want city staff, including the city engineer, to work with the petitioners to, the concept is good, the mixed use is good. I didn't hear any concerns about multifamily, but it's really how much is on the site, how does the circulation work, what are the opportunities to improve it, think through parking a little bit more, building height was an issue.
And I would recommend to the city and to the petitioner to go back and look at the previous plan, which we did spend a great deal of time on, and we did spend a great deal of time on looking at the flow on the site with then it was called a coffee shop, now it's being called a Starbucks, but we spent a great deal of time on that, and maybe also looking at the massing of, and I understand it's a commercial versus now a residential, but the site seemed, from the previous plan, to work a little bit. It worked much better. We obviously approved it and passed it. So I would encourage going back and just looking at that previous plan.
We will follow up with the petitioner and work through some of the technical issues. We'll try and get some confirmation from IDOT and really focus on the site plan and not go further into the design at this point until we get that site plan to a point where this commission is comfortable with it. And when this comes back before you, we'll further detail. We'll have all the detail we need to actually detail responses to the various findings and criteria that you will need to look at for the subdivision, for the special use permit, and for any variances that are requested.
Thank you. At this point in the meeting, there's an opportunity for the public to address the Plan Commission for matters that are not on the agenda. Is anybody here wishing to address the Plan Commission? I see nobody. Anything else from staff, announcements, other business matters? Does it look like we'll have an October meeting?
It does. We do anticipate another petition for yet another restaurant in the Central Business District. Isn't filed yet, but I think that they will get that together quickly.
Okay.
So we will let you know that as soon as we confirm that.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.